Welcome to the Service Management Leadership Podcast. We have a great guest today, Alex Fullick. He's been on the podcast before. Alex, it's great having you back.
Great to be back, Jeffrey. How are you doing?
I am awesome. This is the time of year in the fall that I really enjoy the cooler weather. I know you're much further north than I am, so it's cooler more time of the year. But here in the South in the U.S., we go from hot to it starts cooling off. So I always enjoy it.
Yeah, fall's is my favorite time of the year. And the trees look amazing as I look out the window, greens, orange, reds, browns.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's a little drizzly today, so it really does feel like fall. Yeah, it's still nice. Days are still warm. Nights are cooling off a little bit, but it's kind of a good time right now.
Oh, it's awesome. I always get fired up. But
as long as we don't get snow.
I understand where you are. You might get snow anytime during the fall, winter, spring, maybe even summer. But so I wanted to have you on, talk about your new book. The book is called Planning and Performing the Business Impact Analysis, the Cost, the Challenges, and the Consideration. Those watching on video, Alex is holding up a copy.
Yes, there you go.
All right. It's a mouthful. I do the same because I like having context on the front of the book. So it's planning and performing the BIA, Business Impact Analysis, the cost, the challenges, and the consideration. What led you to write this book?
Well, where do I start? First of all, with COVID, there was time to do it. I wasn't traveling 2 hours in the morning to work and 2 hours home anymore. So I found I had more time. And so that definitely helped, and you're at home, so you need something to do. You can only vacuum and dust and cook and walk the dog so many times, so, and I like to write and read. So that definitely helped. One of the other thing is when COVID really started happening, especially back in March of 2020, if not a little sooner than that, there were a lot of posts on LinkedIn and some other sites where people were talking about BIAs, and they were saying, did you review your BIAs to determine what you're going to do? And there seemed to be a lot of, there was a kerfuffle around between different groups. No, we didn't touch them because the mandate was everyone go home. Plain and simple. So what do we need the BIA to determine who's going home? Everyone's going home. Everyone needs to work there. Everyone needs the resources. What's the BIA going to tell us any different? Or continuity plans. So that was happening. And then there were some other talks, as people always do, talk about BIAs, well, we don't do one. And then that would upset somebody else. So there was a lot of stuff going on about BIAs. And I started to think back going, well, maybe they're not looking at BIAs or anything like that because they've got challenges with them. And I started to think going, yeah, that's interesting. Nobody ever talks about the challenges with BIAs. If you hear traditionalists, it's thou must have a BIA, it must have our RTOs, it must have a list of processes, it must, et cetera, et cetera. And you talk to new people, it's like, well, no, if we already have a program, and we have things in place, we already have a disaster recovery strategy in place, we're not going to go backwards to have a BIA contradict what we've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. So and I thought, well, maybe there's some people out there that when they're performing a BIA, if they need to or want to or been directed, because I've received a couple of emails saying, what the heck do I do? I don't know what to do. So I decided, well, maybe people just aren't aware of some of the challenges that come out there. And because when you do a BIA, you're really not doing a BIA. You are doing 40 plus BIAs if there's 40 departments in your or a organization, and you got to meet with every single one of them. So you're really doing 40, just one findings report, but you're doing 40 BIAs. And there are so many challenges that come out of doing all of that. And I thought, nobody ever talks about those. It's almost as though it's romanticized. We have a BIA, and it'll give us all this fancy, great stuff, which is great. If it works for you, it works for you. So nobody send, poor Jeffrey an email saying, complaining about this. You can send it to me if you want. But I thought, why doesn't anyone ever bring up these challenges? And it got me thinking. I started writing some notes, and I was just going to do a blog or a simple little video on my own, talking about that, and it just kept growing, and that's what I started to document, and how the book started to come around. And I thought, what, that's what the next book's going to be about, a BIA and all the challenges that it offers us and the opportunities it offers us to learn. And I used a project management approach when I wrote it, because I also work a lot in project management and program management. And I purposely went to learn those skills, because all the challenges I bring up in the book are ones I've experienced. There isn't a single thing in here that I haven't gone through. Every single thing is an experience in here. And a lot of them I just didn't know really how to manage, because they don't teach you that. You don't hear about all the challenges. You don't find a book that tells you about these kind of things. And if you're taking a training course, you're told how to do a BIA, and that's it. You're not told about all the hurdles you're going to run into and how to manage those hurdles so that you get what you need and be able to move forward. And I decided, you know what, I think it's time someone stepped in and helped people with all these challenges. And that's how it came about.
Wow.
That's a short answer, right?
Yes. And I would say that when you're in training, or first of all, you don't go to school to become a business continuity person. And so all the trainings are the what. And it seems that your book addresses a lot of the why. And so, like in your title, the cost, the challenges, and the considerations leads us into the why. What are some of the considerations for the BIAs to help people understand them better?
Well, I could always give that, like I used the word earlier, romanticized response. It gives you these processes and RTOs. Well, that's been done ad nauseum. I don't cover that kind of stuff. So I'll give a couple of different responses that I actually put in the book, and some of them. And one of them is, if you're doing a BIA, understand the driver. And I know some people have talked about this. What's driving the BIA? Is it a tick box on somebody's report? Is that why you have to do it? And if you do, you can guarantee that BIA is really not going to be one of those comprehensive ones they teach you about. It'll be a quick, what do you do? Who do you need to do it? What do you need to do it? Where do you do it? Okay, great. If you can't do it, is there anything you can do? Yes, no, great, fine. It'll be really quick. It won't be a detailed, in-depth thinking exercise, with a questionnaire or face-to-face or an application, whatever you're using. It'll be a quick responses to a few questions, and that'll end up being it. If there's something like the FCA mandate that's now come through from the Bank of England regarding organizational resilience and operational resilience, et cetera, the BIA, demonstrate BIA has to be a lot more robust now. It has to show your dependencies upstream, downstream, to the left and the right, everything. It's got to take what your traditional thinking of BIA is and then times it by 10, if not more. So it's much more in depth. So you need to know what the driver is, why you're doing it, so that if you're only addressing a tick box, that's all your BIA is going to do, will be enough just to get that tick box. If you're starting from scratch, you have no program, or you had a program and it's miserably failed, no one's looked at anything for 5 years or more, then okay, the driver is, we need to protect our business. We need to protect our people, our brand, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be much more in depth. And if that's your driver, then you've really got to take a step back and think about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it to get the best result you can to help you. And everything that you capture, all that information, are you going to leverage it? That's one of the other things that I mentioned in the book as well, is sometimes it's we make our own make work effort. We ask 100 questions, we get all this information, and then we only use a small amount of it. We get all this information from BIAs asking all these questions, but what's the report say at the end? Here's your processes and RTO. Okay, so I only used 2 bits of that information, yet I asked 100 questions. Well, I don't think we use that information that we get the best way. So that was one of the other things. And I mentioned, I kind of touched on it, executive expectations. I definitely mentioned it in here because their expectations can be a driver as well, but it can also tell you, do you even need to go through a BIA exercise? Again, don't send Jeffrey emails, send them to me. If they already have expectations, this is what we expect when X situation occurs or Y situation occurs. We expect this to be addressed, this to be addressed, and this to be addressed. Those are the 3 key things we expect, we need as an organization, because they're already setting the vision and the mission of the organization. So your BIA results really need to align with that vision and mission,
Yes.
right? And a lot of that doesn't come up too much. A lot of people don't bring that forward, and it needs to. So that vision and mission are the expectations of leadership, the corporate leadership. So if you're doing a BIA, like I said, they have to align. And sometimes you may find that, well, all I need to do is meet with these 40 department leads and at a very high level, just understand what they do and where they fit in to this vision and mission and these expectations that have already been set. And that will cut back on some of the additional timing that it takes to do a BIA, which is another item. I've seen, and I've read it online a few times, sometimes a BIA has taken 6 months to a year, especially with large organizations, multinationals. They're doing the whole organization, every country, maybe each country is doing their own one, but it's not considered over until everybody is finished and got their report together. And that can take over a year. What the heck can happen in a year? Absolutely anything. We've been in a global pandemic for the last year and a half. Would that BIA have been any help? No. So, and especially if you have regulatory requirements you're trying to meet, like I said, the drivers, you're not going to have a year and a half to do that. Or you have an audit finding. If audit is driving the bus, audit's not going to wait a year and a half, though separately, I would talk to audit to find out why they're telling you how to do your job. They should be holding your feet to the fire on how you do your job, not how they tell you you should be doing your job. But that's just a little side note there. So, finding out from executives what the drivers are, and that'll help with timing. So all those different pieces. Then there was something else that I mentioned that's happened a lot, and I think it happens almost in everything, and that comes down to assumptions. If you're talking with 40 different managers, their responses are based on best guesses, what they know, and what they're assuming will happen in other areas of the organization. And I fell into this trap a lot of times, especially when I started out. I wasn't recording those assumptions.
Right.
Because
I have them in mind. I will tell you, I have them in mind. In the assumptions, and I'm jumping in only to lead you to a point, okay? The one part that I think that we have to have a BIA for is to prioritize resources since they're finite.
Yeah, it's true. That is a key point, because all these other responses are based, like I said, on best guesses.
Yes.
Excuse me. I based on the question you asked me, here's my response. By the way, I'm assuming that all these other people are available. Well, there you go, right to resources, right off the bat.
Right. Oh yeah.
And everybody does that.
Yes.
And what people forget to do is to document those assumptions and then talk to those other groups. Collections says payroll, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And payroll may just look at you blank and go, what? Are they dreaming?
Or IT. Everybody blames IT. Everybody's like, my assumption is IT is going to have their business continuity plan, right?
Yep, that's one of the biggest assumptions that frustrates me the most is there's a fire, there's some sort of a crisis, whatever the situation may be, but IT will be available. What, are they in a magical bubble?
Right.
They don't get sick. They don't get in, Lord forbid, a car accident or, if when the building's on fire, they're fine. They're part of the building. Nothing gets touched. They're completely fine. Wrong.
Right.
They'll be ready in 2 hours. Well, up and running in 2 hours. Well, that's great, but the alternate side is 6 hours away, right? And we don't have airplanes or helicopters on the roof. So how are you getting them there?
Exactly.
So fast. And I found, and it happens, and I get frustrated about assumptions because of my project management background as well, because assumptions just happen nonstop, and you have to challenge them.
Oh yeah.
If true, then this is what we're going to do. If it's not true, well, then you know what? The person who made that assumption, you got to go back and look at what you were doing. And it doesn't happen very much. People don't do it, and everything gets built, and when something occurs, it's like a house of cards. The tiniest little piece of wind, and the whole thing comes crashing down because everybody was assuming.
Oh yeah.
So that's one. And then there was just one last point I thought I'd bring up. If you're creating a business continuity management program or resilience program or whatever moniker people want to use these days, think of BIA as a project. It has a start, it has an end date, and it has a specific deliverable, which is, I'm paraphrasing the definition of a project by the Project Management Institute. And that's exactly what you're doing with the BIA. You're starting on a date, you have an end date in mind, you have a specific deliverable that contributes to something bigger.
Yes.
Which is the BCM program. And I think anyone doing a BIA or working in business continuity or resilience, incident management, whatever, IT even, I think everybody needs to understand the basics of project management to get better results, and look at it as a project so that you are documenting the risks associated. And I'm not talking fires and floods. I'm talking risks associated with a project. If Jeffrey doesn't give me his response to this assumption, then this is what's going to happen to my timeline, those kind of things. And you have to communicate that to your sponsor, the decisions that are made along the way, the action items, following up on action items, following up on assumptions, and documenting that whole thing, and understanding that when you're communicating, if I'm talking with Jeffrey, every day, and we're talking about the BIA, that's fine. We're going to talk about risks and issues and decisions and our next steps and BIA responses on one level. However, when I have to take that to the C-suite, I have to describe that in a different manner. Right. I can't go into that detail when it comes to the same thing Jeffrey and I are saying, right? They don't understand, maybe they do, but they don't have the time to pay attention to some long, drawn out issue, or risk or situation. They want to know, are you on track? What are the hurdles? How can I help you? Do you need a decision from me? Right? Yeah. It's different. And that's something a lot of people don't understand. And I've even brought it to some of the conferences that are out there, saying, you know what, I have a course that I've got here mapped out. I could throw it together and just give a couple of hours, project management for non-project managers, so they understand all of this. And that's goes back to part of the challenges, part of why I wrote the book, all those different things that keep happening.
Oh, wow. So I did bring up the prioritization of resources only because, to me, the BIA tells you, okay, if you think of the old requirements, Moscow, what must, what should, what could, what want, those are kind of what my thought is. What must remain continuous, what should remain continuous, what could, and you have these buckets. But unless you go through a BIA and you try to understand what's the most important thing to our business to remain continuous, it's hard to get there without the BIA. That's my view. Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with it. Again, it's to do that with the BIA, you may change the way you're doing it.
Right.
You're not going to have the 120, 200 questions, whatever someone might have. You're going to strip it down.
Yep.
So that you are just focusing on resources. What do I need to be able to determine what are the resources I need?
Yep.
Well, okay, this is it. It's a stripped down version. So you can do that to get what it is you need. Again, though, that's going to determine why you're doing it. If you've got audit or turning around saying, well, you need to have a BIA to show X, Y, and Z, but then Y and Z you're never using, what's the point?
Right. And that's where I've always been. Is you mentioned an organization at 40 departments. Which of the 40 are the most important that we have to remain continuous? And then what's the next level? And then what's the next level? And prioritize, if you're the project manager, your time accordingly on those 40, right?
Yeah. Which again will align back to the priorities that executives have, which are related to the vision and mission, which they've already put in place.
Yep. Should tie nicely.
I'll quickly tell you an example of something that happened to me, which started changing my thinking on BIAs. I was already changing it, and you can tell from the first book that I was already starting to kind of change my thinking of it. We did the BIA. We had our list of priorities, and our RTOs, what's in 2 hours, 4 hours, 24 hours, et cetera, et cetera. And I had the draft, and I sat with the sponsor, Doug, who was the CFO of this government agency. And I showed him and said, here you go. Here's the draft findings. He looked at it, and I'll never forget it. I've said this many times. His response was, this is embarrassing. And I got really nervous. Well, oh my God, what did I do? I've done lots of these things. I know what I'm doing. And he said, what the managers and employees believe to be of importance to this organization in a disaster doesn't align with our expectations. And when I started that engagement, I didn't have access to Doug and everybody else in the C-suite. Within 2 days, I finally got my audience with them and went through, and we then found out what their expectations were, took that back to everybody, and we completely revamped that whole list, so that it aligns with their expectations, which aligned with their vision and mission. And if they don't align, it doesn't matter what your finding report is going to say.
Right. It doesn't matter.
But I'll never forget that. This is embarrassing.
And from his point of view, it is. And you can, or I can only imagine that when you went back to the lower level people, they were like, oh yes, Doug does have a point. Let's redo this, because that's not a battle they want.
Yeah, well, that's when I started to realize, and they were saying it, going, well, this is what we do. Everybody wants to be important, right? Nobody wants to feel as though they're, lower on the totem pole, so to speak. But when they understood what the expectations of the leadership, then they knew, going, okay, yeah, I can't do what I do because those have to be up first. Then I can do what I can do. And that's how actually we started to address some of the assumptions at the same time.
Yeah, I can see that.
But it was really strange to go through and sit there with the CFO, and got all hot and sweaty and uncomfortable. I think he knew I did, and he let me sweat for a little bit.
Oh my.
Spoke up, but.
So you mentioned your previous book, and it's called Business Impact Analysis, Building the Foundation for a Strong Business Continuity Program. What's the difference between this book and the older book, which still isn't that old, it's only 2015, and this new book, both on business impact analyses?
Well, the first one, first of all, you can tell by the looks. One is a normal book sizing, so to speak.
Yes.
And the other one is more workbook type of size. And the difference is the second one, of course, the new one, we've talked about it already, but the first one was actually a little bit of a how-to with little bits of some of these things that I've already brought up in there, but it wasn't really mature enough in my mind yet to really capture it. but it became a how-to, do a BIA, you want to know all this and that. And I thought, well, what do we need to ask? What are some of the questions we ask? So I pulled out some of my old BIAs from government agencies and marketing companies and some of the other stuff, and took a lot of the common questions that appeared. And I put them in this book, the first one. I thought, here's the question. And I started to add, here's why you asked that question. And the response should be something that you should be able to do A, B, and C with. So if you're asking this question, you get this response, do something with it. If you don't, well, don't ask the question. You don't need it. Excuse me. So that was the difference with the first one. The first one is more how-to. It didn't start out to be a how-to, but it became more of a how-to to do it, rather than just listen to someone do a BIA, and this is what you get at the end. Well, no, do a BIA. Here's the questions you ask. Here's why you ask. Here's the categories to look at. And you mentioned resources. Resources are there. Employees, key employees, skill sets. Is there even something I've never heard anyone else say it yet? So maybe I'm the first. Who knows? But also upcoming project implementations.
Yes.
Is there anything coming up that's going to change your response now? In 6 months, yeah, we're implementing a new application. Okay, well then why are we giving all these responses now? Let's, or give these responses, we have to revisit them as part of the implementation plan, as a after action type thing. We've implemented, okay, now we're going to make a change. We've got to capture all these changes. So those kind of things, your processes, your locations, all those different categories are in here with the questions that go with them. And why you're asking them and what you do with that information when you get it. And a couple of helpful tips along the way. I do mention assumptions and things like that in here as well. And status reports when you're reporting, who you report to, and knowing that the report you give to your sponsor is going to be different than the one you're populating for the board of directors, if you're doing that kind of thing. So the focus was a little bit different there. Was there anything else? I think those were the key areas, and the difference. Actually, it's not a difference. It's one thing that remained the same between both books, is that some of these examples, I've already said that the new book, every single thing I mentioned, I went through. Well, it's the same in the first book as well. I don't like just to write about, what I've heard, or just copying words from somebody else's book and then citing them. No, everything I've gone through.
I understand.
I hope you don't mind, but I'm slowly losing my voice. I'm going to take a drink of water.
I understand. My business continuity book was all about the areas where I experienced, and just some of the heartache of living on both sides of that, from an internal versus also being a consultant. Changing direction. So one of our podcasts a few episodes ago, a guy named David Cannon, he talked about the increasing rates of change. Like the changes, yes, we think we've had a lot of change through this pandemic. And he makes the case, and I agree with him, that the rates of change are going to even increase more as we come out of the pandemic. So my brain goes, I wonder how that's going to impact business continuity. And I know I'm shifting gears on you, but this whole rates of change, when we do an annual or every other year update to our business continuity, there's so much change afoot. It seems like we need to be able to account for it somehow.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be a lot of changes in this industry. We're already seeing, we're already experiencing some of it, and especially when you start hearing terms like operational resilience
Yes.
and is business continuity dying? No, not necessarily. Business continuity is a part of that operational resilience, because operational resilience is in its name. It's something either ready for use or already in use that keeps the organization and all the cogs in it moving. And business continuity is there. if it's not being leveraged fully, it's there for leverage. So it still falls under operational resilience. But I think that's the networking and the infrastructure in the background is going to change. Business continuity isn't going to be seen, I hope, as something standalone now, and it can't. It has to work with the incident management people, the emergency or disaster management people, the IT disaster recovery people, and some of these people are all the same. They're just got different little areas, right? They've got to work together. If you have an incident, well, manual workarounds or some sort of overrides, which would all be captured in some sort of a continuity plan, gets leveraged. So you bring all these groups together, and I think business continuity needs to stand up and do that, because business continuity has what I think a lot of other groups don't have, is the luxury of understanding all the different players.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we need to leverage more. We may not know everything on detailed aspects, such as how you rebuild a server, and how the connectivity between all the different racks in the operation center, but we do know all the people that are involved. We do know if someone's got a question, who they can go see. Or we can either answer it ourselves, or we can bring these people together. And I think that's something that we need to look at in business continuity, is to make that happen. I think we can be a leader if we do it right. We can be a leader in operational resilience. We can drive the bus. We can bring everybody together, because some of these areas, incident management and emergency management, risk management, they all have their own information security and cyber, all that. Right. They all have their own industry certifications, their own courses, their own experts and everything. So everyone's going to want to be the one in charge. But how many people in information security are going to know the entire business and all the players? And I'm not knocking anyone in information security, so again, don't send letters. But I think business continuity is well positioned, because they are going to know a lot of those players and be able to bring them together. So I think that's a change that isn't here yet, but I think it's coming. And the winds of change are starting to feel it. And I think if we do it right, we can lead and be the driver of that. And I also think with you mentioned, we've gone through COVID, is that we have to look now beyond the usual risk scenario situations.
Right.
I've, for years and years and years, it's even mentioned in the first BIA book, I haven't looked at things as, we have a disaster, a flood, a fire, or something like that. I've looked at what impacts our people, our places, our things. Yep. Which for anyone old enough will remember, those were the first original 3 categories on Wheel of Fortune, which is where I kind of snagged it from, because it was easy to remember: people, places, and things. And what impacts those, because any disaster is going to have an impact on one or more of those. COVID, all 3 of those were available. So that traditional thinking of an earthquake could impact this and that has to go out the window. It's not the earthquake anymore. It can be something else. We have to look beyond the scenario, and I think other aspects like climate change now are coming into play, because we're reading stories of people losing their homes. I just read, well, of course it's not beside me anymore, a book by Dr. Montano called Disasterology. And she talks, instead of people moving away from disaster zones, they just raise their houses on these stilts, especially down in Louisiana and some of these other places. Yes. And yet all these areas are going to be gone soon, including the businesses that support them, because the sea is eating it away. Well, if you've got a neighborhood's disappearing and all the businesses, well, then you've got to get involved with business continuity and disaster management people, and how, if you've got somebody who's now a supplier that's in one of these areas, you've got to look closer at them now. It's not just the case of, okay, well, if that gas station's not closed, I'll go to this one. Well, no, if there's gas shortage everywhere, what are you going to do? It's not just one place. Look what's happening in the UK. Yeah. Gas shortage everywhere now. So you don't have the gas to drive to other stations anymore. So,
oh yeah.
So I think business continuity has to start looking beyond the traditional scenario and risk views now. And I think one of the other things, and I'm happy to hear this too, because I've been saying it for a long time too, is people. Start looking at people, because I think we're going to have another pandemic wave, but not of the illness, but of mental well-being of people. People locked at home. We're seeing some of that frustration come out now on airplanes and in restaurants and in malls. People that are angry over these stupidest things, but it's just setting people off. Well, now you're going to have all these people that have been cooped up at home for a year and a half, and you want them all to go back in the office. Oh my God. We're just asking for, potential situations here. So I think there has to be more focus on people. And I think that's starting to happen. Business continuity plans for the longest time, or IT DRPs or crisis management, whatever, they were written for people. Here's your plan. Now it's got to be, Jeffrey, I need your help to write your plan.
Right.
What are your expectations? How even the wording comes right down to the wording, something that you're going to understand, not my terminology, but your terminology that you understand. So I think there has to be a greater level of focus on people. And I think those are some of the key areas I think that are going to happen, changing our display of value. And one of the other things that I've thought about recently is I think everyone needs to understand what the plan is. Yes. And when I say that, I don't mean they need to know every single line in an ITDRP or a crisis management plan or something. No, I think everyone in our organization needs to have an idea, a high level idea and understanding of what the plan is. Really, the strategy level, the high level view. Everybody should be able to say, if we have a fire, X is doing this, Y is doing that, Z goes there. Yes. Everyone should know that without having to understand all the details. And I think that's a part of also building that organizational and operational resilience. Everyone will understand what's going on. Everyone can contribute that way. And I think that's something that I've been thinking about it, and I've started to read it a little bit online, and I agree with, everyone needs to understand the plan. I've worked at a place where the CIO didn't want us to have awareness sessions about disasters because he was too worried it would freak people out. No, that'll make them nervous. I said, so what'll happen? What happens when we have a real situation? We have no one who understands anything, no one who's aware of anything. And he just looked at me, he goes, well, that's your job. I'm going, and what if I'm in the car on the way home?
Right. Or on a vacation. Or on vacation.
Yeah. And I looked at him, I said, and you're the CIO. So does that mean I become the CIO and you're out? And he goes, he laughed and like, no. I go, well, then you have to be a part of this awareness as well.
Yes.
I said, everyone needs to be. Oh, yeah. So he still didn't like it, but.
So I thought of a couple of scenarios that go, well, really three that go across people, places, and things. One is we assume that we will always have internet wherever we're at. And to me, with the distributed workforce, that doesn't, assuming everybody has power and internet is a false assumption, I think, because that hits people, places, and things. But the other two are some of the biggest shifts that I have seen. And so we talk about the distributed workforce, but I think move to the cloud in the use of vendors are some of the ones that cut across those three, yet are key to the success of any organization. I mean, I'm talking IT, not IT, but the ability to adjust in those changing times is a big thing.
Yeah, I agree. We kind of touched on it before we started recording here.
Yeah.
And I did some lookups before we were talking today of business continuity in the cloud, or BC in the cloud in BC, whichever way it came across. And everything I read, everything would be one line. Oh, business continuity, it's great, a place to keep your plans. And then instantly it would draw off and divert into a technology discussion. I'm going, well, that's kind of okay, I guess. However, if all my, and we've mentioned it already, manual overrides and the steps on how to do that are in these plans that are in the cloud, and the cloud's not available, the internet's not there, like you mentioned, then what?
Right.
There is no business continuity in the cloud.
No.
And a lot of them, they were saying, there was one example, and I got a chuckle out of this. You can keep your critical data in the cloud and then the rest of your data in-house. Well, I've worked in project management, and I'm sure you've come across this, where you have applications that literally are touching on hundreds of data fields, and they're all interconnected as well, and they won't show properly if they're not connected with 10 other data fields. And you take the 10, the small percentage that you deem as critical, put them on the cloud, and one's gone. Well, you may still have 90% of your data fields available. None of it will work.
Right.
You're still stuck. So what good is having all that stuff in the cloud if it's not connected properly? And if you have an outage or something occurs, then what? And also now you've got people that are working at home. What if my server provider goes down and I'm a key person? Well, the rest of the company is fine, but I'm at home. I can't do anything. So I'm at home, and I've actually impacted the whole company.
I know it happens with phone system IVRs that impacts people, places, and things, right? Because I think of power. I built these for a electric utility, and their customer service, which is the most needed during an event, is the ability to take phone calls. They assume that, well, we can just send everybody home if their power's out at the building. Like, how can you assume that at home they have power too if it's not at the building? Because most people live within a proximity of their building. And if you can't assume they have power, you can't assume they have internet to be able to take those phone calls. And so, that cuts across those people, places, and things to just have to be able to figure out how to find redundancy somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. Business continuity in the cloud, to me, is more of how do you continue your business using the cloud?
Yes.
Rather than actual business continuity management in the cloud.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's there yet.
Well,
because there's too many things. You mentioned internet's not there. What if the provider is not there? How are things? You may not know how things are set up at this vendor's location. There are servers, virtual servers where you've got 3 or 4 different clients lined up. Well, if one server goes down, now you've got 3 or 4 clients going down. You don't know that, even though it could not even be related to you. You're still now going to be impacted because somebody else has an issue, somebody you're not even dealing with. So, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I do think having things in the cloud makes it easier for a lot of organizations. Especially when everything is tickety-boo and everything's a rose garden and a rainbow. But if there is an issue or a blip, the impacts can be really detrimental.
Right. Plus, how do you test? Is Amazon really going to come to your BC test and represent what their business continuity plans? I pick on Amazon, could be Azure or whoever, or even one of your SaaS applications. Or do they really care enough about you to come be a part of yours? And the answer is no. And so you're running these BC tests, back to your word assumptions, assuming that theirs is always going to be available.
Yeah.
It might be, it might not be.
Yeah. And really, it doesn't add a lot of value.
Right.
Testing that way.
Right.
Because all you're doing is validating all your, you're not even validating, you're just testing your assumptions, but actually not proving if they're correct.
We like that though, Alex, if we're being honest, we like the confirmation bias. Yes, I was right. Yes. Where really we, that whole time of BC testing is to find out the holes where you're wrong. So let's fix them before an event.
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah,
gets off on something else.
and I can't imagine, Amazon ever showing up, or anybody, or
Oh no.
IBM or whoever.
Oh
They're
no.
not going to.
Well,
If they've got thousands and thousands of clients, dealing with the cloud, they don't have thousands and thousands of people that are going to be a part of our tests.
no. Even the power company, when I was there, the driver for implementing that program was big clients were like, hey, we need to make sure you have redundancy in your power. Do you have BC plans? Well, and then send me off to go build right back, backfill it all. But we have to think that we built this hierarchy where it's based upon someone else's internal or external business continuity, based on another, all full of assumptions.
Yeah. And you mentioned the workforce, working at home. That's adding a whole new perspective on things as well, because the home is now being considered on some level part of an office,
Right.
part of the company. How far can you take that? Right? It's my home. It's not part of an organization. However, if I'm working and I get up and trip and fall, is that workers, compensation? Is that a health and safety issue? What is that? Or did just because I was stupid enough to trip over this pair of slippers under my desk, I didn't move them, but I got injured. Is that a work-related injury? So all of these kind of issues are now starting to crop up. And I know there were already security and privacy concerns that were there, and a lot of companies have dealt with them and changed the way they do things. Still, I can still be in my office. I can't tell my partner not to come in here.
Right.
Or kids go away.
Right.
No, they're still going to come in, and check on their uncle, their dad, their brother, whoever it may be. So how far is too far for HR to reach?
Right.
And what are some of these policies going to be in place? And how do you support the technology behind it? I'm working, I'm at home, I'm in my office. I've made sure that nobody can get in. I lock the door when I'm not there. Even when I'm there, I close the door. However, my laptop has died. Now what do I do? Are you sending someone here to come pick it up? How are you supporting it?
Right. Take that step further. How about the company pushes through a patch that takes down their distributed workforce? They can't send people out so it takes down people, place, and things. And they can't send somebody out to everybody's house. They can't mail their laptop back in and wait for another, because now you're talking days on days. It creates new business continuity challenges in ways that we have not looked at the problem before. And I think of the organizations that push out the single sign-on, right? If that has a failure and now I can't log into the stuff I need to do, it took down everything, regardless of what my BC plan, my BIA, or anything else said, right?
Yeah. And there's, I know, challenge with external call centers now.
Yes.
As well, because of some of those same examples. My computer's now down. Well, I call the call center. They can't help me because my computer's down.
Exactly.
Well, that's who you're supposed to call. Yeah, but they can't do anything. They can't dial in and take control of a work computer. And what if it's a home computer that I'm using and dialed through? It's like, I'm not giving them control to that.
Right.
So there's all these other different things that are cropping up that we didn't think of before. And it'll be interesting to see how some organizations deal with it, because they're obviously, to some extent, they are being dealt with right now. We just haven't heard the stories come to the surface yet of how it was being dealt with.
Change is afoot. Always.
Change is the only constant.
I'm afraid that's true, especially as we age.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on. Any parting words?
Oh my goodness. I just want to reiterate with the BIA. If you're doing a BIA and it works for you, don't change.
Right.
Just continue doing. There's no point in arguing or getting upset over it. If you have to do a BIA, well then, as I say, really look into it and make sure you understand why you're doing it and what it is you have to do with it. It's not the romanticized thing that some people say it is. And at one point I did too, but there are ways, as the old saying goes, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yes.
Not that I'm promoting that, but it is an old expression. So, really take a look and understand all the challenges and everything that comes with a BIA, and treat it like a project, and get to know some of these management and communication techniques that are out there, because they will help you, not just with your BIA, but documenting strategies, and you will be able to show a lot of value by understanding some of this stuff.
Awesome. So I know your book's on Amazon. Is there any other place it's available? And also, how can people get in touch with you?
It is on Amazon, both ebook and physical version. You can also go to my website. You can eventually find me through alexfullick.com or stone-road.com. There's a shop section. You can buy it there. My publisher, volumesdirect.com. I'm there. And if you want to reach me, all those letters that I mentioned earlier on, you can send them to me. I'm at alex@stone-road.com. That, when I say dash, I mean the hyphen sign. So alex@stone-road.com. Or I am the only Alex Fullick on LinkedIn. So I'm really easy to find.
I understand being the only Jeffrey Tefertiller. And I'm like, is there anybody else that looks like this? There aren't that many imposters when you look like I do. People aren't lining up like, I want to look like that guy. And so, here we are. Alex, it's great having you on. Thank you for your time and sharing your knowledge. And everybody go find his book and learn about BIAs. Have a great day, Alex.
Thank you for having me. Take care.